Thank you everyone for coming. Distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, brings me immense pleasure to welcome you today to our second annual forum of the Impact Philanthropy Partnership, or the IPP for short. This partnership is a joint initiative between WMI and the Private Banking Industry Group, supported by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, aiming to build greater awareness and momentum for strategic philanthropy here in Singapore and in Asia. It's been incredibly heartening to see the growing interest and energy in this area as testament to what we see here today. In the last 1 year alone, we've been able to bring over 400 family office professionals, principals, and social entrepreneurs across different convenings to learn, share, collaborate, and explore. And we have a wonderful group of delegates here in the room today. In this room, we have wealth owners and funders who are leveraging the full spectrum of impact capital, from grant making to impact investing. We have trusted advisors from banks and different sectors whose expertise is critical in supporting these families. And finally, we have charities. We have the social enterprises and ecosystem enablers who are delivering and scaling these solutions on the ground. Now, many of us here who are based in Singapore would have seen the rapid growth in family offices in recent years. And we know that giving back is a notion deeply ingrained in Asian families. But we're now seeing wealth owners looking to channel their resources increasingly in a more strategic manner, also growing interest in the more innovative ways to look at and to fund impact. And yet, many funders are still at an early stage of that learning curve. More often than not, they find themselves unsure of the initial steps to make meaningful change. On the advisors and professionals as well often encounter their own sets of challenges as they seek to better guide their clients on philanthropic endeavors. And so without a practitioner-based institutions to really support that learning in the ecosystem, the path forward is not always clear. We always say the first step in every journey is learning and awareness. To take a Kung Fu analogy, you need to be a disciple before you become a hero. And for us, another word for hero is changemaker. And that is the reason why WMI is so excited to be able to launch the Asia Center for Changemakers, or ACC for short. This is our collective response to bridging the institutional and knowledge gaps in Asia's impact ecosystem, and I'm delighted to share more about the rollout of the ACC here today. So with the founding support of Temasek Trust and the Philanthropy Asia Alliance, in addition to many other partners who are here with us in this room, the ACC will support family principals, professionals, advisors, and social entrepreneurs in 3 ways. First, we'll foster a community of practice, creating a space for sharing insights and experience, and building momentum within a tightly knit, yet expanding ecosystem. And beyond this forum, we welcome you to join us at the more intimate roundtables and sharing sessions that we'll be hosting throughout the year. Second, through practice-based education programs, we will aim to professionalize the sector with guidance from faculty members who are thought leaders and leading practitioners in their fields. Learners will not just hear about philanthropy and impact capital, they'll actively engage in it to build professional expertise and skills. And lastly, we hope to create Asian-grown thought leadership, ensuring that our community remains ready to meet the sector's current and future needs. Our vision for the ACC is to be Asia's learning lab for changemakers, to become more active and informed, ready to deploy their resources, skills, and passion for a better tomorrow. And so for those of you who are ready to pursue that journey, please come on board. We are launching our Certified Impact Philanthropy Professional Program, which is specially created as a professional's qualification to create and build capabilities among professionals and advisors with our first cohort in May. Later in the year, we'll be launching an Impact Fellowship, providing funders, wealth owners, and social entrepreneurs with that broad skill set needed to drive change. And for the practitioners here hoping to steer the movement to purposeful wealth in Asia, we invite you to join hands. The many ways to collaborate, from building thought leadership through research, profiling the great examples that your work is doing on the ground, developing your role as an industry expert or an educator, hosting a roundtable among peers who are passionate with your cause. We see so many friends and organizations in the audience. We really look forward to working together with everyone. As we build this momentum, I invite you all to come and be at this core, at this center of change-making. So all of this then is geared towards galvanizing impact and action, and that is really what our theme for today's forum is about, turning insights into impactful action to scale tomorrow's solutions. So we hope for a few things upon leaving today's forum. We hope that you have met some great people, had some good conversations, but critically that you would have gained new, concrete ideas on how to enact tangible change. And that is why we've curated this forum to not only share the very hard-earned lessons from our principals, professionals, and entrepreneurs on our panel, but also to provide a very intentional platform for you to consider how these lessons can be applied to yourselves and to your own domain. Therefore, do not miss the opportunity to pose questions, please, to our panel of family principals as they share how and why they decided on the causes that are critical to them, how they drove alignment with their families and their teams. Please challenge our philanthropic foundation heads and professionals as they dive into the different impact capital approaches. They'll candidly discuss what works and what doesn't work in which types of situations and how that can be a guide. And you will directly shape the concluding session by interacting with one of the most exciting ventures coming out of the Earthshot Prize.
Well, thank you. I think Robert effectively made our panelists nervous. It's hard to top that, but what we'll share in the next 30 minutes will be something slightly easier to replicate, I believe. And also in a slightly warmer environment. Let me start. I think Brian has already defined the goal of our fireside chat today is basically to share the hard-earned lessons that you have on your journey with everyone in this room. I will start with BK, if I may. So tell us about Extraordinary People, what do you do, and when and why you get started, how to get everybody along.
Hello, everyone. So the why is actually to give back. And there's a push and a pull reason. So for me, I wanted to commemorate my father's 25th year passing. So that's brewing, but I had no clue what I wanted to do. And then my dear cousin appeared one day. She started this journey earlier than myself. And after being involved in a project with Pathlight, which is a special needs school in Singapore, she could see how the parents of these children, they had hope again in their eyes. They began to have the ability to reimagine what's possible. So that moved her deeply. And in 2017, Extraordinary People was formed. That's how we started.
And tell us more about what does Extraordinary People do?
So Extraordinary People is a IPC, is a registered charity. We focus in championing for the special needs communities, and we like to push the boundaries and try out new models.
Thank you. So that's also started with the idea of continuing that legacy, or have a new chapter of a legacy, which is echoing what Robert has shared. Let me turn to Francesco. Tell us more about Firetree. What does Firetree do? And especially one American scientist, Dr. Richard Hoagland, specialized in fluorescent dyes and molecule probes. Believe me, I know everything about it. Decided to devote a big chunk of his money to philanthropies in Asia.
Yeah, he ended up devoting all of his money to philanthropy, and we decided to do that long time ago now. What does Firetree do? Firetree supports doers, so supports organizations that in different countries in Asia work for communities to solve their problems together with the community. We also run our own initiatives, although luckily there is nobody from my team here because I like to start things and then somebody has to follow up. But it all started really, at least for the fire tree part of the journey, by me being in Cambodia and by really serendipity, running into an English woman who was trying to start a project for street children. And one way and the other, I got involved. I helped her to set up the organization, and very quickly I realized that we were affecting people's lives. And so I remember cycling back to my hotel and thinking, okay, you have to decide what you want to do here. And I decided to stop doing the for-profit work I was doing and just dedicate my time to do this. And so Fire Tree was born out of that.
Thank you. And turn to Pierre. So tell us about what inspired you to start the Royal Unite Foundation? What's your goal?
Oh, well, I think started from, a while back, not at 11, I guess, like Robert, but, I always thought, there's a lot of luck that plays in life. And, we're all here in this room pretty fortunate to be here. Where you're born, the family you're born in, plays a big role in what you can achieve and the access and the opportunities that you get. And I think that's something that I always thought, we should try to provide to everyone. And 20 years ago, I met my wife in London, but she's originally from Mongolia, and therefore discovered the country, explored a beautiful country, but which at the time was just emerging from, former Soviet Union, and really had a lot of issues, difficulties, and challenges. And so I think the idea was always to try to create, a tool, a vehicle to try to contribute and give back to and support effectively the development of Mongolia. And since now we've got our kids, it's also for us a way as a family project to really, create a link with that country. Unfortunately, we don't live there all the time, we visit, but it's, I think it's important as a family project to have that.
So it comes from the family.
Yes.
Well, and then I'll move on to my favorite question. Well, everyone can start sending your questions through scanning the QR code. I'll promise you'll leave 10 minutes for your question. My favorite question is, what are the mistakes and challenges you've made? So who wants to get started first? Francesco, you say you have thousands to share.
Yeah, but we have 25 minutes, so it's definitely not enough. So I think if I had to pick one, I'm lucky to go first. I think it would be to think you know anything at all. When, again, you will learn very quickly if you're doing things, and writing checks is a different story, but even writing checks, you make a lot of mistakes because you give the check to the wrong person. But if you start interacting with people in different contexts, and you approach it in a black and white way, you realize very quickly that you're just being silly, because you will learn that a child working on a beach is doing that because the mother is sick or there is a sick baby at home, not because the mother is evil and wants to earn money. So there is always a reason, and if you don't spend time to understand the problem and the reason, then you will always fail. It's true in business, but it's particularly true in philanthropy, and I think that is a mistake I've made initially and I've learned not to make.
That's very important, that in addition to passion, you need compassion, and also you need to be humble during the journey. So, Pierre?
No, I guess, I don't like to call them mistakes. I think they're learning opportunities. And I think as you progress, by doing and getting involved, this is how you effectively learn. And by definition, you set out on a path, as Francesco was saying, and you realize, actually, this is the wrong direction, and you need to adjust. So, there's no, some examples that I've done is early on, before we properly defined what we wanted to do, before we focused really the areas we wanted to intervene on, we went too broad, being too dispersed and therefore having no impact really, and being not that effective. So I think for me that's one of the things, is learn to focus and define clearly what you want to do.
And how different was that from your business world?
How different?
How different the life in
it's not really.
philanthropy?
I guess that's the point. I think the issue, what you realize is, philanthropy often is associated with something very personal, emotions, etc. In reality, though, it should be managed in the same professional way as business is managed, or any other type of initiative is managed. Because if you really want to have an impact, you'll need to go through the process of learning, understanding the communities you want to work with, finding out what the issues are, the real issues, not the issues you think they have, and really work from there and slowly build the process.
Thanks. And BK?
Yeah, so following from that, so one mistake for me is to perceive our beneficiaries as less fortunate, So I think that leads me to see things using criteria rather than the person in front of me. It's a person. It's differently abled, but a person. So a good example is initially we offered a lot of our programs free, without realizing that we're actually not doing good. We are not respecting the self-dignity and ownership. So we learned very quickly. Yeah, so I thought that was quite important because a lot of programs, they are what I call criteria-centric, not person or human-centric. Because you never know. You can never start with an answer. You need to start with a question. And you need to listen, find out, journey with the beneficiaries.
So keep an open mind. That's very important. So in addition to the mistakes, what are the biggest opportunities you see, especially in this region?
Well, let me add one mistake quickly.
I know you have thousands.
That mistake is to think you can do it alone, and instead you can't. So you need to work to build a team of people that know more than you do, because otherwise they're not very useful. Realize that they know more than you do and trust them, and then build also partnerships with other philanthropists and people that want to achieve the same goal. And that's also the opportunity. Be open, be very transparent about what you're trying to achieve and why you're trying to achieve it and what your values are. And in my experience here in Singapore in the last 3 years, for example, as a member of APC, is that there are a lot of like-minded people. And the opportunity is to work together to really catalyze everything that is being done and go further. Very similar to what you are doing in Australia. You have to work with others. Chris is a friend and somebody that is very aligned with all that. So it's always the same ecosystem, but it's an ecosystem that keeps growing, and that's the opportunity.
Exactly. You touched upon the point that make Firetree is so important, that you're building not just one philanthropy, but an ecosystem. But how to build an ecosystem?
Well, by trying, first of all, and having ideas and having friends who see things the same way and all together really want to bring good practices, best practices to a broader audience. So ecosystem really have to be based on shared values first, a similar, if not completely same vision, and again, humility, so that nobody feels more important than others, nobody feels they know more than others, but everybody in an ecosystem has to find the right place. So what is my role is different than what is Lawrence Lien's role, for example, but together we have built and are building ACF and are doing different things. So that's just an example, but it's a very relevant one.
And in terms of institutional setup, how would you shape your work to accommodate that?
Different countries, different ways, obviously. So in Singapore, it's pretty straightforward. So we set up a company limited by guarantees, and then we register with the COC. You create a board of strong people that don't have to agree with you, but actually can push you. Antonia is here, and is a great example. But the setup is important, so governance is always very important. In other countries, you just have to know the context and bring in the right people to achieve the mission of whatever organization you're structuring.
And Pierre, what do you see as the biggest opportunities, and what is your experience dealing with different stakeholders in the ecosystem in Mongolia?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for us, opportunity for me is in Mongolia. So, and it's an opportunity in the sense because if I look at the country, it's a very large country, very small population. It's also very cold in winter. It goes to -40 as well. And we work with the Gare community or the Gare district, and the Gare effectively is a traditional Mongolian tent from the nomadic culture. And you have in Ulaanbaatar, which represents about 1.5 million people, which is half the population of the country, about half of that living in this sort of Gare district, which is a sort of shanty town, I guess you could call it. And so the thing is, we're a relatively small organization, but because we can, we try to operate in an environment that's fairly concentrated. If we achieve impact, and that's going to take time and probably over decades, we can really change the country and help support the development of the country as a whole. So I think for me that's what I see as the opportunity in Mongolia. Not obvious how you replicate that elsewhere, but
And BK?
Yeah. For me, I feel that everyone wants to do good. Everyone wants to contribute. So I think philanthropy offers the opportunity, and we can be the catalyst to actually bring the community together. As COVID has exposed, there's actually the community resilience is not there. So how can we actually, through all these activities, that's why the ecosystem approach is important, because a lot of times charities are not working in partnership. And so one of the very interesting projects that we're working on is what I call the future of fundraising, whereby we are trying to attempt to disrupt fundraising completely. And the solution is to bring everybody together. I mean, that's a key idea. But we think that we don't have all the answers, but I think this is a damn worthy cause to bring everyone together.
Yeah, that's important. And another question is, philanthropy, it's not easy to get it started, but it's even harder to get it sustained, especially for self-sustain. How do you make the work self-sustainable? BK?
Like I said, so we faced that very quickly. So we realized that, it's a necessary evil for most charities, and you have donor fatigue. After the third time, people say, oh no, BK, what do you want again? Right? So, and also, like case in point, it's nothing to be proud. Like a lot of sectors in Singapore, they promote about inclusivity. There are a lot of charities doing that. But we don't even have a common calendar for the parents or the caregivers. Why not? Right, so a lot to do. But we need to think differently and not try to be bigger and better than the next charity. But how can we sort of hand in hand? Because a lot of us, the goals are the same. So it begins from having this conversation, and establishing this genuine human-to-human connection, Robert says. There are a lot of problems, yes, but let's bring out the best in us, humanity, to face all these challenges. And rather than just, I can do it, and just rush alone. Team is important, like what Francesco has mentioned, the whole team.
So work together, team, alliance, and everyone. Francisco?
Yeah, so sustainability, when you mention it, you think about money, but actually think about people. Because if you don't have a team that you take care of, and if you cannot sustain your team, and the team cannot sustain the community they work for, then everything falls apart. Doesn't matter how much money are allocated to it. So to me, sustainability really is finding the right people, supporting them the best way possible.
Yeah?
Yeah, I guess what we're trying to achieve is really looking at, we obviously have some direct impact, but also some systemic impact. And to achieve systemic impact, I think you need to operate on multiple levels. And so we've defined, we use an approach that, we call practice to policy, but which really relies on 5 pillars. One is obviously the projects, the pilots that we support and invest in. The other one is knowledge building. So, white papers, actually understanding again the topics where we get involved by going on the ground, working with the communities, understanding their issues, the gaps and the opportunities, and publishing that, using that to broaden the community, which really is a third pillar, really, in the sense of strengthening the ecosystem. So working with all the participants in the sector. We talked about partnership. I think it's essential because everyone can do something on their own, but we achieve so much more if we get together. So as a concrete example, in Mongolia, together with UNICEF, we've created the Mongolian Early Childhood Education Network, and then bringing all the participants to sit down on a regular basis, to share learnings, to look at synergies and potential partnerships on particular topics. So that was the third. The fourth is really around policy engagement, and again, using the knowledge that we build to engage with government and, over time have an impact on the various policies, again, on early childhood. We've participated in the government task force or workforce on defining new policies going forward. So, that helps us also make sure that the pilots that we have are relevant to what the policies are and vice versa. And the final point is trying to bring more money. So although you're right, sustainability is not about money, but it's also, Mongolia is not on the map for a lot of people. We have our resources, but they're limited by definition. And so for us, building on the work that we're doing, we hope to be able to also bring others to come in and work along and fund alongside us some of the project.
So with that, we'll open up to the questions from the floor and start with where you ended, with money. One question is, the world is facing rising problems, rising income inequality, and also rising distrust in government. To do good, should families do more philanthropy, give more money to the philanthropy, be forced to pay more tax, or is there a third path? That's a big question. Please, BK. What the best option for the families?
Having conversations. Digging deep, finding out your own inner values, because a lot of times people are rushing doing things, but you have to start from yourself. So what really actually stirs you, what actually moves you? Because if you don't answer the why, you will not last long.
Yeah. I think that there's different things. It's not an either or in this case. I think, and if you, again, going back to the point of systemic impact and sustainability, everything we do in philanthropy will not achieve long-term impact if we don't eventually work with government. So you need to pay taxes to fund what the government needs to do, but philanthropy is also helpful because it can move faster, can take more risk, and can help prove certain things that can then be shared and applied via with the government. So I think for me it's not a exclusive. You have to do both.
More work. And the second question is actually very relevant as well. Why did you decide to build charities rather than stay as a funder? So basically, when you decide to write a check or run the philanthropy yourself, what makes you make the decision?
Well, we do both. When do we do things directly? That is when we see a big problem. We see a community that, for some reasons, we care particularly about, and we don't see anybody else working in that context or in a certain way. So I just came back from the Philippines, from Manila, where we ran our own project in a very poor area of Manila called Tondo, and that's because no other organization is doing it. And we just felt there was a gap that we could fill, so we built the organization, hired the right people, and cooperate with everybody else. So again, the government has a role, philanthropy has a role, other charities, when they come over, have a role. But we just decided that it was meaningful for us to do that because we could and because we had the experience to do it. In other cases, when we find great organizations, we just want to give them the resources they need. We don't want to interfere and say, oh, well, we could do it better, etc. No. They are the experts and we support them. So really, it's always about knowing your place, and sometimes if you're particularly motivated, you will do it yourself, but only when you feel you can do it really well, not just for the sake of doing it.
Anyone to come add anything? No?
Not specifically, because we're a grant maker, so we don't actually operate ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think to echo the point, I think when you look at, again, Mongolia as an example, it's a relatively immature or young, philanthropic environment, and therefore, beyond giving the grant, we also sometimes co-design with people. So it depends what you need, what you find, the organization you support.
Yeah. And another question is, there's a lot of emphasis on collaborative philanthropy, but many Asian families want to build legacy and be known, be remembered for their own programs, build up the legacy, and that's part of the family name. How do you encourage partnership yet enable legacy building? A tricky question, but important.
I think we've come to an age where I think COVID really shows that we need to come together as a consortium. And yet, you have that individual differences, your freedom to be who you are. So that's the tricky part. So we are actually trying to sort of come up with some solutions. So it's like, how can you do mass customization, right? So everyone has different needs, but how can we collectively come together to address? So that is the tricky part.
And actually, we just heard a
Yeah.
beautiful story about legacy, and about legacy is not having the next generation and the young generation doing exactly the same, but actually exploring and developing different things and listening to each other. So I think part of the ecosystem, once again, is to give the option to next gen and young generations to discover their own role, their own passion, and build around that, not just follow.
Yeah. Another question, very pragmatic, is did any of the family member disagree with your philanthropy, and how did you manage that?
Well, family is a very small unit in my case, so it's my wife and I. So we do disagree quite regularly, not about the philanthropy in general, but about how to do it, what to do. But I guess that goes back to the starting point and the starting journey for when we started. We wanted to launch the foundation. Philanthropy is about, very personal. We talked about its emotions. Families are about emotions. So if you add all this together, it could be quite complicated to come to a landing and an agreement. And so what we've done is really creating, used somebody external to help us formulate what we wanted to do, what values we wanted to convey with the family foundation, what mission we wanted, and how to focus, and then how to implement that together. So I think creating a process, a system, a framework helps you work those issues and those potential disagreements within the family, because you have a clear line, you have a red line of what it is you're trying to achieve. And if you've defined that up front, it's like having you're clear about the philosophy, then it's a lot easier to come to a landing on various issues.
And BK, you have a slightly larger family.
Okay. So of course, one of the mission is to create pathways for the post-18 special needs. So for me, I'm long time interested in health and well-being. So then between myself and Wei Ling, we have no fights. So we are very clear what are our strengths, and we just respect that. It's just like if I'm good in climbing a mountain, then I'm the leader. But if she's good in the sea, then she becomes the captain. So we sort of pass the baton within teams. Yeah. So no issue. So nothing much to share there for my case.
But clarity up front helps. Clarity of division of job and clarity on the go of the philanthropy in general. Several questions about the next generation. So Robert is now supporting Barney to find his path towards impact. How do you relate to your next generation or the generation before you and their version of impact?
I don't have a next generation, so I have to pass.
Pierre, kids are young?
Yeah, they're a bit young. I mean, they're not that young. They're getting to the stage where hopefully they're going to get more involved, and that's part of the initial project as well, is what do you want to leave your kids? And you can leave money. That's not particularly helpful. Or you can leave something that's value-driven and obviously is there to contribute to the broader society. So I think that, to me, was part of the origin as well of the project, is to get them involved and leave them something that is other than money.
Yeah, I think it's not just, it's the world that will be leaving them behind, not exactly something, right? And by example, like what Robert says, hopefully through what we do, we actually contribute to the positive energy, amongst all this chaos that we are experiencing now, the world.
All right, and another important keyword is actually trust. So the question is, how to build and sustain trust?
Well, number one, by being honest. Talking about challenges, failures, learning opportunities, call them as you like, but be open about that, and be open about your learnings as well. I don't know why some philanthropists still find it difficult to share, less and less, and I think is the very opposite. Like trust your peers, trust other philanthropists, listen to them, trust experts, trust your team. But really, trust is the key word. There is no philanthropy without trust. Everything else is an ego-driven exercise. Trust is what defines philanthropy.
Very important. Anyone to add? Well, if not, I'll wrap up with asking one last question. We still have 2 minutes, and especially the 3 minutes Robert saved us. One last question is, well, Robert started today by sharing with us a very personal journey, and I want to hear your personal story as well. If you give us one moment that you find most rewarding in your journey in philanthropy, what that would be?
Well, it's very personal. Many years ago, when I was still in Cambodia, in that first project that I started, Maggie, the co-founder, and myself felt we were failing this young girl because her mother wanted her to go back and live and beg in the streets. So when we closed the center at 5 p.m., we took her for an ice cream, and she said we were very upset, and she did tell us, "Don't worry, I will not live this life for long." And now she is actually working in a factory. It's not a dream story where she is a brain surgeon, but she works in a factory, she has a stable job, she moved away, and with her went all her younger siblings. So she was stronger than we were, and that's part of the personal journey. Not only they are not beneficiaries or weaker than we are, but actually they are often stronger. The people we are working for are stronger, and we have to learn from them.
That's a very strong message. They're actually stronger than us, or we can learn or get the strength from the journey as well. BK?
Yeah, so we did an event recently with magician Cyril Takayama. So, he concluded. So he thought for the longest time, he wanted to use his magic, to sort of affect these kids, these special needs, to inspire them, that magic is another tract. But in the end, he realized it was their magic that touched him. So who is helping who? Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And Pierre, last word?
No, I guess I feel it's a bit early for me to have something, when we started, we said, we're going to be there for 10, 20 years, and we'll know whether it's working, long time forward. So I almost feel it's too early, so I don't really want to say, obviously every day you meet people you work with or people in the Gare district, and you see some of the direct impact you're having is great, and it's very encouraging. And as everybody says, you get so much more from the individuals than you give in reality. But that's one person at a time. Ideally, you want to try to change the entire thing, and that's going to take a long time. So, a bit early to say.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So please join me, my friends, in thanking our 3 panelists for sharing with us very inspiring insights. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for spending time with us and moving from the principles to what are often called professionals, but I have an astute panel here, as we were just introduced with, and we're super excited to jump in. When we were prepping for this and getting to know each other, we sort of moved entirely off topic, and Celia talked about going to Vipassana, which is like this silent retreat where you don't talk for 9 days and you really just stay with yourself, and Rob and I were completely horrified by this thought, but then she proceeded to tell us that we both actually needed too much validation. So with that, let's kick this off. I hope this validates us, but also for all of you, the importance of professionalizing philanthropy. I think from my perspective, I'm excited to moderate this because it's been 25 years that I co-founded an organization called Dasra, despite my accent. It is based and has been based, and I am based in India. And so thank you, Robert, for the shout out to India. Incredible country, but a lot has changed, and the landscape of philanthropy has changed, and how families engage in their wealth with philanthropy. continues to change. So I'm thrilled that this region is playing a more and more important role. And so with that, I wanted to chat a bit about your different approaches. I said success for me would be if I didn't exist anymore on stage. So I'm going to hope you speak to each other and really tell a little bit of your journeys first, since I'm not giving the introductions to you individually, a little bit about yourselves, your organization, and your sort of approach to philanthropy. And Carol, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Nira, and thank you, WMI, for inviting us. It's quite a humbling experience because we are a very new foundation in the sector. So my name is Carol. I was brought into the family, which is the family behind Pandora, the global jewelry brand, about 4 years ago. And my job was basically to build foundations for each of the family member, which is quite unique because they didn't want to do things together. So talk about collaborative philanthropy, right? It didn't start from the family. So Eka was really born out of that. It's actually the next generation foundation for the son. And he clearly didn't really want to work together with his father on that journey, primarily because their interest was totally different. So that's really the start of it. So what's our approach to philanthropy? To be very frank, we struggled a long time to define what we do and how we do it. In fact, we didn't have the language around how we do it. Until 2 years ago, we actually commissioned our first partnership survey with all our partners, and we basically went to ask them, you know, are we shitty as a funder, and like, can we do better, and how do we help you, right? And we got a consultant in from UK who's now a dear friend, Bonnie Chu, and she went around interviewing everybody anonymously. We had a portfolio big enough to not be able to guess who they are and what they say about us. And she came back to me and she said, Carol, I think you're practicing relational philanthropy. And to be frank, as professional, I had zero idea what that meant, because I completely didn't know what is relational philanthropy. So I started Googling and like tried to pretend that I actually knew what I was talking about to my principal. And it's a whole lot of idea that really came from the West, that we really invest in relationships. So right off the bat, Christian, my principal, he's Danish. He couldn't really quite pick a certain issue area. And I think that's quite unusual for philanthropists. I think most people know what they want to support. But he, being at his age and really early stage in his journey, he's like, I want to support everything. And I'm like, I can't do everything for you because it's almost impossible. We can do that, but we're not going to achieve anything. And so we just basically did intuitively what we always do well as an Asian-based, foundation, which is to invest in people and relationships. We went around having a lot of conversations with different people about what they're doing, to the point that we really went crazy around understanding what relational philanthropy meant, and we started operationalizing it internally, and we started codifying a partnership framework built around the idea of dating. And this is really true. I have the whole framework I can share with anybody who wants to take a look at it. Because we realized very quickly building partnerships is really like dating. So we have the first date where we craft questions that we will ask our partners and they will ask us. So what is your vision? Do you want to have kids? What kind of kids do you want to have? Are they going to grow up? Is it sustainable? Are they going to find a job by themselves? It's all these questions we will ask each other when you're dating. And then it all leads eventually to the proposal and then the marriage. So we have everything codified from first step to the end. The only difference between philanthropic partnerships or marriages and actual dating is that we are polyamorous. We go into multiple marriages with multiple people, and they go into multiple marriages with other people. So we started really going on this crazy journey of defining what we do, and I think that's where we landed. And I just end off with the last thing. Because I'm Singaporean, we also started to, I think, how many of you know the 5 C's? It's a millennial concept. Credit card, cash, condominium. So we also create our own C's. So we had 3 C's. Capital, which is quite usual. We provide all kinds of capital because we are tied to a family office, unrestricted grants to impact investments, equity, debts. We are quite free. Second is really capacity building, and it sounds very nice when a foundation say that, but really it's not so much we build the capacity of them, it's them building capacity for us, because we are very much learning from them. So we don't pretend that we can actually build their capacities. And the last one, I think, is quite understated, is confidence. And I think through the course of our working with our partners, we realized they really want to be seen. Their projects want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to have the courage to tell the other funders to not give them restricted money. They want to have the courage to tell the other funders to not give them reimbursement models, which is crazy because do the work, we'll pay you later. That's not going to work. So I think confidence, I just want to point out that that's really important, and we started even measuring to what extent have our support built confidence for our partners. So I'll just pause here before I sound really crazy in the way we codify, the way we work.
Okay, wow. I also want a great metaphor, like marriage, for what we're doing. So my name is Celia Indal. I joined EQT, which is a global investment firm with 230 billion in asset under management euros globally. I came along to start the foundation, and what I brought into my interview at that time in my kind of, dating area with the firm was, okay, you're an investment firm. You have this amazing global platform, 2,000 employees. How can you bring that together with philanthropic capital? And I think that's kind of a key point to everybody who's starting their journey, is like, how can we bring our DNA as a family and a foundation together with more flexible capital, which is actually what philanthropic capital is. And I think we're moving in an era where, philanthropy has been very passive to an era where it has to be very active. So from, putting the family's name on a school and feeling great about it, which is a good thing to do, but actually learning philanthropic organizations to be risk capitalists, taking first loss money, and doing the things that catalyze change. So we do catalytic capital. It is the first pool of capital, the first loss pool. You can invest in areas that don't have track record. You can go in. We have an evergreen fund vehicle that we've built under the foundation, controlled by the foundation, that can recycle the money to the entrepreneurs. So if you have a climate technology that takes 25 years to mature, you can actually go in and support them the entire way. You don't have to sell out before the technology gets to market. So that's how we work on the investment side. For every entrepreneur, we support with 3 employees from EQT globally to connect them to pilot customers. We have 300 portfolio companies in the world. So pilot customers, sector expertise, anything that can shorten that route of 25 years to get them to market. We also do catalytic grants. On that side, we support the scientists that come up with something great because they're in an intersection of their field, and they like, oh, I do this in neuroscience, but if you put it inside a plant, we can actually save the climate. So crazy things that they just need 6 more months in the lab to test. So the type of grants you can give that it's hard for them to get, and it's also really hard for the research institution to support because it doesn't drive a new paper or research paper, right? So we do fast grants for scientists. They apply, they get the money. All we need to know is that they have a great idea of how research can be implemented in a different field. We also do design funding for innovative fund structures. So now we're just funded a pilot on systemic investing in Asia. And systemic investing is what, and as a foundation, we say we are here to push the frontier of impact through entrepreneurship. And systemic investing is really about moving from an investment paradigm where you one investor invests in one company, in one asset, and then you try to understand the context in the market to predict the risk and return of that asset. Moving to a multiple asset paradigm, like a portfolio way of investing. So you take capital, and often you coordinate capital across asset classes into several investments across an ecosystem to drive a system shift. So take your project on regenerative agriculture or regenerative forestation, right? How can you get infrastructure investors, real estate investments, equity investment, debt funders, everybody to align their capital around one mission in one location over a time frame? A lot of the challenge and barrier of getting to impact at scale is coordinating investors, getting the right risk-adjusted return for what they're going into, and being able to take out the transition risk of the volatility of all these changes that we have to go through. So if you can coordinate investor in one location, the transitions we're going to is not about investing in software rights. And for all you sitting here, you want to change things in atoms, in the real world. So we have to be on the ground, getting our hands dirty. And we have to do that in a very coordinated global way. And I think systemic investing is a very promising solution, but it's hard work on the coordination. And having pilots done in this region is going to be incredibly important because the delta of doing it here is so big. most pilots on this form of investing is happening in European countries. So you're doing green mobility in a country where it would already happen in a couple of years, but doing green mobility in Jakarta, for example, there you have an impact delta that is important for driving the climate change mitigations we want.
Hi, I'm Robert Rosen. I'm the Director of Philanthropic Partnerships at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Just in terms of governance, we're still the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, even though the marriage situation has changed over the years. And it's grounded in a family philanthropy started by Bill, Melinda, and Bill Gates Sr. Now about 25 years ago. We've grown to a fairly sizable foundation. This year we're at about $8.6 billion in terms of grant making, and we'll move to a cap next year of $9 billion. As a conglomerate, because we're involved in many different areas focused on health, global development, economic mobility, gender equality, and then the US focused on education and mobility, we actually deploy a lot of different instruments. At its core, though, we are a programmatic grant maker. We are not an implementing foundation. We work through a series of partners to define very clear outcomes in terms of goals, by program. So contributing, for example, in our polio eradication program, it's a very clear goal. We want to rid the world of polio, and so it's working with a series of partners on specific grant components to drive towards that objective. But we do deploy a number of different instruments. I think it's certainly in the US, and I see this happening in other parts of the world, there's sort of this false argument, and I think that gets more headlines of kind of the Gates Foundation was the poster child of strategic grant making in sort of the 2015 and held up as a model for what great looked like. And if you fast forward to the last few years, trust-based philanthropy and the approach that Mackenzie Scott is using is held up as really the model. We should all know that there's a sliding scale between those. They're not mutually exclusive, that there are deep elements of trust-based grant making within how we work, and also a great deal of strategy in how she works. And so we should not have these false fights and swings of the pendulum. We also deploy the use of our strategic investment fund for program-related investments. And so we really do look at a number of different instruments in terms of how we're going to drive change. I think importantly, the grant making is obviously its core. Without that grant making, we'd just be some folks with opinions. But really, when we want to drive change and when we work at our best, it is the combination of three elements that come together, which is one, a clear and coherent strategy. That can never be developed in a vacuum. It's developed with partners. But as we look at something like HIV, what is the goal? How are we actually going to get there? What is the strategy for it? That's one. Two, the money, because without the money, again, you're just somebody with an opinion. But three, the voice. How we use our voice, whether that is to convene, whether that is to advocate, whether that is to crowd in partners, whether it is to coalesce around a vision, it's crucial. And so when you have those three elements together, that's where we can drive the most effective change.
So all three of you make this sound incredibly easy. I believe the principals before us also made it sound incredibly easy, but I want to take one step further, and it might feel a bit boring, but it's important for us to think about moving from, the individual family and their giving to institutions and organizing how that giving happens. And to some of your approaches, you would imagine it takes, you have a gigantic team, Rob, but they also have different kinds of structures and teams. Maybe if you can just speak a bit to your institutional journey and maybe how you're structured, what journey has that taken? Has it changed over time? And if you can add some color to your relationship with the family and with the principal through this. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Where do I start? We've been through, just first up, please do not Google about us. We've been reinventing ourselves so much in the last 3 years that our website is hugely outdated.
I already did it.
Oh, dude. the principal, he's in his early 40s. He's a very playful guy. He's Danish. And so very early on, he was like, let's create a sandbox because it sounds nice, right? Let's just test different things. Let's just try different kinds of partnerships with big organizations, dodgy ones, not dodgy ones, good ones, bad ones. And just he really wanted to just really put himself out there and really learn for himself what that meant to him. And before the panel, we were just joking about if you could put a heart monitor for every principal and just measure their heart rate, when do you spike, when do you cry, I think we would know more accurately what do they really want. Because half the time when I talk to him, he says one thing and I'm like, I don't think that's what you really want, right? And he's like, that's what I want. And then we do it, and then he's like, actually, that's not what I want. So we just keep going this to and fro conversation about, oh, let's just try what you want, and then it's not, and then yada yada, and then it's a very painful experience for everybody. I'm not sure if that's bad, ugly, or good, but I think what I've learned was working very closely with one principal and one family, and by all means, it's different for every family, is that patience, like time, it's like understated. Like the amount of patience I need to have, he needs to have with me, it's crazy. So this sandbox in the last 3 years have changed dramatically, right? And I think last December we finally sat together, reflected, we went like a, not a silent retreat, but like a retreat, team retreat where we actually talk. And we made a decision about some things and we'll be very excited to review it end of this year. But finally we came to a point after 4 painful years to decide on some things. And even still, somebody will look at us as like, actually, what do you really do? So half the time, we really don't know what we're doing. And I think that's really fine because it's a journey. And with many principals, I hope the principals will agree because I'm not a principal. For him, it's a journey and he needs to go through that himself. No amount of professionals or experts or people in a room could tell you exactly what to do because he needs to figure it out for himself. And I think that's what I've learned the most journeying with him on his journey. Just basically be patient, like crazily patient with not seeing the results that I eagerly want because it's okay. I mean, they want the impact they want to do what they want. So I think that's ultimately the biggest lesson I've learned as a professional advisor.
Yeah, I think, so on your side it's patience, but on the family office side or setting up a new foundation, it's often patience with yourself, of understanding your point of being on that journey. So the EQT Foundation is connected to a firm, but it was actually individual who set it up. So 15 of the partners who's been part of building the firm donated away their shareholding when they started the foundation. And they're kind of a committee, so it's kind of a multi-family office setup. They all have their own family office on the side. But they're also, as a collective, on that journey of how they can give back. And what they see when they do it under or together with the corporation EQT is that they can actually systematically benefit from the platform and the expertise that they all also built up. So I think it's figuring out what you care about. Back to the heart monitor. If you had people and you would show them different pictures, they would know what they care about. So figuring out what you as a family, and the Tonic network I know is also looking to do more in Asia and create a community here. And they have a lot of families who's gone in therapy together, like parents and children talking about what are their family values and what do they care about, which I think is also an important step to decide either to do something together or to do something separate.
Yeah, well, I'll bring two perspectives on this. One, working at the Gates Foundation in terms of understanding how we work, and then also in my role as head of philanthropic partnerships, we work with a host of different families through a number of networks like the Giving Pledge, and so you get a first-hand look at this. Look, I think first, we are privileged, and I say this with deep sincerity, to have the ability to work directly with our co-chairs, our founders on this. It was a little bit shocking coming in of just the volume of email that would come in at various times of night from Bill and or Melinda after they'd read something. We have a very, very productive governance process, which we call our strategy reviews. And so we do these over 2 weeks now in the fall, first week of October, first week in November, which we're always going to remember, where different teams go forward to do sort of their annual look at where they are. And then hopefully, and I've really tried to model using this the right way, deal with the most pressing challenges that you have and try and get the legitimate conversation about the challenges and opportunities. we get pushed hard by Bill and Melinda, as they should do. Because I think the responsibility that I always have to remember when I think about the budget that I have, first off, it's competing against other things in the foundation. $1 spent on philanthropic partnerships could be competing against vaccines going through the Gavi Alliance, or an incredible breakthrough innovation on HIV frontiers, whatever that is. I mean, so we should hold that, and ultimately we have the responsibility to be the stewards of their resources. And so when they ask how it's going, we have a real responsibility to think about how it's going and push ourselves to have the greatest possible impact. I think that accountability, because you don't get the same market signals in philanthropy, is hugely important and should be hugely motivating for us. Working with a number of different families, we get to see some really interesting dynamics. When I think about content that we do in philanthropic partnerships, I always think about 3 circles coming out. The center of the bullseye is to what? What are you going to give to? Do you care about education, health, criminal justice? The second layer is how. How do you think about setting strategy, measuring impact, structure? The third layer is the context. And I think it's a really important one for any family to consider, which is, where does this fit in your life? Are you still driving the enterprise that built the wealth? Do you like to do expeditions to the Arctic or wherever it might be? Are you passionate about how you spend your time is an incredibly important factor. As a couple, thinking about that dynamic, because there are a lot of different models, and when we say, hey, we do this together, that can mean a lot of different things. And then when you throw the children equation in, whether they're very young or multiple generation, it adds a lot of complexity. And I think the most important thing that I've seen is the conversations that don't happen. The questions that aren't considered are the things that can upend everything. So you can have a great strategy, you can have a commitment of resources, but if you're not grounded in how you're doing this, where your values are and where the alignment is, it will, at a minimum, hit some significant bumps, and I've seen it, potentially risk implosion. And so what I'd urge people, it's like questions of perpetuity. Should we be a spend down? Should we be perpetual? There's validity in both choices. I work at a spend down, will be done 20 years after their passing. Others have been extraordinary perpetual foundations. Either can be valid, but the tragedy is the unintended perpetual, because they never get to the conversation. And so I think in all of this, it's a role of the staff and others around them to be truth tellers and to really push for, having legitimate debates, we might call them. It's never a comfortable position to say to a principal, particularly principals like I have, hey, I hear you, but I've got a different perspective on it, but that's our responsibility and our duty.
Yeah, just before, and we'll wrap up and I'll ask this question, but you can just add from what you're hearing from Rob. So we've done quite a lot to say the relationship between the professionals and the principals, but there's also a relationship in how you're representing these foundations in the ecosystem. And there's a funny story of a gentleman from the UK, a family philanthropist who was invited to be head of Atlantic Philanthropies, which is was a huge foundation. And when he became the chairperson of Atlantic Philanthropies, he was like, now I'm so much taller, I'm more handsome, and everyone's laughing at my jokes. And it can kind of get to your head. So I wanted to ask you, how do you stay grounded when you're representing the money, but you are really the one that's creating those partnerships, and what keeps you humble? You saw the principals before. I thought they had a tremendous amount of humility there. But if you can just leave us with some thoughts on how you do that in your own role.
Maybe I'll start and
go backwards.
Yeah, yes. I mean, look, recognizing the power dynamic is hugely important. There are several grantees of ours in the room and others, and yeah, we are a little bit taller and a little bit smarter, and our jokes are funnier. But I think you have to create a situation and have the trust. I mean, we talked about that in the last panel. The trust to know who is going to be a truth teller. Who's going to tell me that I'm wrong? Who's going to tell me that they disagree with me? And I actively seek those people out, both from partners and grantees, from colleagues in the foundation, from team members, but that takes work and I think a little bit of grounding on, are you saying you're doing that but not really doing it? Ultimately, it is built by legitimate, deep trust and long-term relationships, and that's where you can get it. And at the same time, I'm an asset distributor. There will never be enough to go around to both the existing partners that I have and new ones that I need to build, and I have to say no to things. And I would say today, probably got 3 different asks. And learned over time that the tyranny of the soft no is about the worst thing that you can possibly do, right? Which is, or the perpetual maybe. Just being clear and saying, hey, great idea, we're not going to do it. Or even harder, I don't think that's a great idea and you shouldn't do it. You just need to have that ability to have candor and be grounded, and then hopefully have a spouse or partner who just calls out your BS.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think truth and the people who will tell the truth is going to be key when you're trusting people to distribute capital that has very low or flexible requirements to it, right? I think any creation happens from seeing the facts, seeing what you can do with them, and then trusting the community around to also align with you to create something that's much bigger than what your family or your foundation can do on their own. So being really, and I think back to your question on grounding, I would just put up silent retreat to go there and speak to yourself about looking at things as they are, seeing the facts as they are, not trying to tell yourself or create an illusion of what you're doing on the ground because it looks nice on pictures, but really understanding am what I'm looking at really effective? Because it's also so important for philanthropic capital to be able to pull the plug when something is not working. So yes, we say fail fast in the venture industry, but in philanthropy, we should really talk about failing fast, because that capital could be placed somewhere else much more effective. Again, moving from passive to active, but also from long-term models where you don't have accountability and report enough to really coming to a paradigm where we expect and create good governance, taking that from business into philanthropy to ensure that the capital is really put effectively towards impact.
I really like the failing fast. We failed a lot. I think for us, from the get-go, we made an early decision to really travel to the ground a lot. In the first year, we onboarded 12 partnerships in Asia, and I made the principal travel with me, very painful for him, to everywhere. We were measuring clams under the ocean, we were planting trees and doing regenerative agriculture in northern Thailand, going to talk to children who were trafficked for sex. We were really everywhere, and he thankfully was willing to put in the time to really get his hands dirty and really kind of go to the ground and talk to real people. And they are the real experts, right? The children will tell you why they said yes to a very exploitative job offer from Cambodia. I mean, to us, those are the experts, and I think for us to stay grounded is really taking the time to really walk the ground, stay true to what we really care about. And I think for him, that has been the biggest lesson that he's taken for the last 3 years. So I think I'll just leave it as that.
Great, yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to just end on a quote. I know we sort of talked about what really drives your heart, head, but also to remind ourselves how much power, privilege, and wealth is in this room and how influential we can be. But there was a concept called radical empathy. You might have read this book called Caste by Isabella, but it's just a lovely explanation of it that I want to leave you all with. Radical empathy, on the other hand, means putting in the work to educate oneself and to listen with a humble heart, to understand another's experience from their perspective, not as we imagine we would feel. Radical empathy is not about you and what you think you'd do in a situation you've never been in or perhaps never will. It's the kindred connection from a place of deep knowing that opens your spirit to the pain of another as they perceive it. The price of privilege is the moral duty to act when one sees another person treated unfairly, and the least that a person in the dominant caste, which is actually all of us, can do is not make the pain any worse. So please remember that, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to be here with you all. My name is Hannah Jones. I have the privilege of being the CEO of the Earthshot Prize. It was set up by Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and we had the exciting year last year of being here in Singapore and bringing the Earthshot Prize to Singapore. I want to give you a little bit about why we exist and what we do, and I'm going to start with the context. So by 2030, the ambition for the world is that we have reduced carbon emissions by over 40%, that we have protected 30% of oceans, fresh water, and nature. And that we need to do that in order to continue to build the kind of a world that our children and our grandchildren will inherit, and in fact, the kind of world that we ourselves want to live in. And that by 2050, that leads to a world where we no longer rely on fossil fuels. Now, I don't know how many of you have been following whether we're tracking on this, but at last year's COP, which happened in Dubai, it became very clear from the UN that we are way off track. And if you go back to that 2030 vision of good, what you need to know is that at least half of the money that will help us get there needs to be spent on innovations that have not yet been invented. And that's where the Earthshot Prize comes in. We are here to nurture the game changers, the entrepreneurs, the dreamers, the builders, all of whom are dedicating their talent and their ingenuity to trying to fix the planet. They're trying to revive our oceans. They're trying to restore nature. They're trying to get to a zero waste world or to clean our air. And they were trying to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And what we look for are solutions that could, if scaled, be transformational for all of us. So what do? We scour the planet for amazing solutions. We have a community of official nominators who help us go out and select them. And from those thousands of nominations, we select 15 finalists a year, of which 5 receive catalytic grant money from us. We don't think that catalytic grant money is enough. So what we also do is wrap a fellowship program around those finalists and go out and meet with potential partners to help crowd in capital and support and give these solutions a chance at going to scale. And that is where philanthropy has an incredibly important role to play. Because the playing field for these solutions, whether they are not-for-profits or for-profits, whether they're youth organizations and community grassroots organizations, academics, the playing field is set against them. It may be that there's all these headlines saying, yes, there's trillions in capital going into green tech and climate solutions, but the truth for every single one of our nominees is that they're doing something risky and brave. They're putting their careers on the line for it. And it's a really hard journey to go from an amazing idea to a scaled solution, particularly in the context of a world where policy and financial systems are not yet helping them to go to scale. Many of the time, the financial incentives are wired against them, not for them. So when standard capital, like a venture capitalist, comes into it, often they'll look at an organization and say, yeah, you're great, but I don't have the patience or the risk appetite. You're not going to give me the returns that I'm being held to. That's where the philanthropists come in. The philanthropists come in and say, I'm going to be risk capital. I'm going to think long-term and intergenerationally. I'm going to think about how I get behind this and get them ready to change markets and to change worlds and to change communities. And so my call to action to all of you is to think about the power and the potential of what you can do to fast track, to accelerate, and to scale solutions that will change lives. Solutions, let me give you 3 examples of solutions changing lives here in Asia that have come through the Earthshot Prize. Let me tell you about Takachar, that works with low-income farmers in India who traditionally burn the harvest stubble, creating air pollution and carbon emissions. Takachar, led by a really talented young entrepreneur called Vidya, has invented a low-cost machine that's a bit like what you would do to coffee. You know, it's a torrefication machine, taking the bean and turning it into coffee. It does that with the stubble, and it's turning it into amazingly high-yield fertilizer. He's worked out how to make this a low-cost thing that farmers can buy together or do it through a leasing. And so it's not just reducing air pollution, it's not just removing carbon, it's also increasing the incomes of those farmers. That's a win-win-win. Who here could be helping Takachar to scale across the whole of Southeast Asia, because who here cares about air pollution for themselves and their children? Thank you. Right, well, I'll come and get your number after this. Let me tell you about other things. Let me tell you about seaweed. Seaweed has this incredible potential to disrupt. It can be used in packaging instead of fossil fuels. You can use seaweed to turn your packaging into something that could be dissolved and not harm the environment. Seaweed farming also has the potential to create jobs for coastal communities who right now are facing huge disruption through the lack of fishing and the overfishing. But that industry is still young and nascent, and there needs to be a lot of work to stitch together how you help the seaweed farmers build their capacity and their capabilities at a local level with coastal communities, all the way through to how you disrupt the fertilizer industry, the packaging industry, the cosmetics industry. Now, if you're a financial person here and you like investing and you're a business-minded person, let me just tell you, this is where you want to invest. It's going to be a future major industry. That's where I'm going anyway. But right now, because it's such a young industry, it also needs philanthropy in there to help it to get to that place where it's investable. The third example I want to give you is actually where I'm going to cede the stage to Peter. Each one of the solutions coming through the Earthshot Prize is incredible, but they can't do it alone. I think we've all talked here in this session about working as a team. We need family offices to come to this with both their entrepreneurial mindset, with their determination and passion to create legacy, and to think about how to use philanthropy as an exciting and critical way of spurring the next economic generation of wealth and prosperity and living in harmony with nature and the oceans. So I'm going to give you the floor to Peter and let him tell you about the work that he's doing. Behind Peter lie thousands and thousands of incredible game changers, and we're here to help support them all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah, for the wonderful introductions. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and put on your funders thinking cap as we bring to you Peter Majeranowski, who will introduce us to the innovative world of Cirque. Keep your funders' questions to Peter in mind, and you'll be guided to post your questions later. Peter, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Hannah, for seating the stage so beautifully. So we are Cirque, and we are scaling a solution for recycling clothing. And we're based in the United States, but after the Earthshot Prize here in Singapore, we ripped up our plan and decided to build our first industrial facility right here in the powerhouse of manufacturing for the textile industry. So I noticed coming in here today that you're all wearing clothing. Thank you. I joke, but it's often probably the only artistic thing most people do every day is decide how they're going to project themselves to the world. And it's so unfortunate that something so personal and beautiful can also be associated with one of the dirtiest, most polluting industries that's also very exploitive of people. This industry probably hires the most women on the planet, many living below the living wage. So to understand how that happens and the scale of this industry, but also the opportunity, this is kind of a TAM, total addressable market. Think of 1 million Boeing 757s. By weight, that's how much this industry puts out every year. And roughly half of that apparel will be in a landfill within 2 years. It's incredibly linear, incredibly wasteful. And to wrap your brain around that, right now there's about 25,000 planes that fly commercially, whether it's Sing Air, Delta, United, whatever. If you put that on a scale, that's less than 1% of the annual textile production. It's massive. This industry uses 2.5 times more plastic than we use for bottles, the same plastic, PET, to make polyester. The majority of our clothing is made from plastic. The next most prevalent fiber type is cotton, and it's under attack with global warming, but also the need to shift our crops away from cotton to grow food for our growing population. So brands have moved to using tree-based fibers. We're harvesting 300 million trees a year to make clothing. That's our best technology right now for absorbing greenhouse gas emissions. And when you fold on top the disposable nature of clothing, the annual impact is 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. That's more than aviation and marine combined. The reason why is because current recycling solutions aren't solutions. 6% gets recycled, but truly less than 1% gets recycled from textiles back into textiles. That's horrible for our planet, incredibly wasteful, but it's a missed economic opportunity. We're paying actually, to throw away $50 billion worth of molecules just in the United States that I want to harvest. And the reason why is because blended textiles cannot be recycled. The majority of the fabrics today are a blend of a plastic, polyester, with a natural fiber cotton, until today. And that's what Cirque's doing. And I won't get into all the chemical engineering and science of how we do this, but we have a patented process where we can take clothing, whether it's from the household, whether it's from post-industrial production to make this shirt, there's another shirt worth of waste along the supply chain, or unsold inventory. We don't care if it's pure cotton, pure polyester, any blend, any color. We put it into our process and we break down the polyester into its building blocks that traditionally come from the oil and gas industry. When we do that, we separate that. And so we have a cotton stream that we can regenerate back into new textiles, and we get this molecule called PTA, purified terephthalic acid, that's the base for making polyester. So we can leave the natural resources in nature and instead use old clothes and old textile to make new clothing. The main driver of our unit economics, which allows us to compete with the cost of virgin, is the fact that we can handle this most prevalent type of waste, polycotton waste. Other waste has secondary uses, which drive a cost, which is fantastic. But mixed color polycotton does not. And that allows us to be so competitive. Plus, we're able to yield almost 90% of what comes in. Those other circles represent the cotton waste market and the polyester waste market, where you see a crowded field. So I like to also use this as our competition slide to show you that we're alone. It's great to have a solution, but even better to have a solution at the right time. Consumers are becoming more aware, especially that angry younger generation that Robert spoke of. And brands happen to be great marketers and retailers that sell clothes. They look at the data, they see what their consumers want. And now regulators are acting, because this is becoming an acute pain point. At some of the most largest cities, including Singapore, where I think you're about 50% at landfill capacity, clothing is the fastest growing waste stream to landfill. 2023 was a huge year for Cirque. It was the first time in the world that commercial clothing collections were launched derived from polycotton waste. We did the first launch with Zara, one of our investors, full disclosure, last spring in Milan. And that retailed for about 49 euros. We then later did a launch with Mara Hoffman, who's a very well-known in fashion circles sustainability designer in New York City. And that price point was $1,200. And I don't like talking about money. Well, maybe that's not true. I'm always asking for investment. But I want to demonstrate here that there's a lot of versatility in our product. It can go into every segment of the market. So where are we going? We've been working at a pilot intermediate stage now for 3 years, where we've perfected our process, we've done the hard work, we've selected world-leading partners, so it's just not me and my friends welding equipment together. We're working with Andritz out of Austria, GEA out of Germany, and Worley Parsons, global firm in engineering, procurement, and management, to engineer and build our first plant. And what we're raising funds now for is the next 12 months to get us to that first plant. So as I mentioned at the outset, we've selected South Asia, Southeast Asia for a first site. We have several that are in the final stages of due diligence. We will select those sites. We'll finalize our engineering work. We'll finalize the contracts with our partners, but most especially important, we're on a journey right now where we will ensure that before a shovel goes in the ground, we know exactly where the material will come in, and we'll have that contracted, and we'll also have all the material that's going out contracted as well to the fashion industry. We recognize that we're disrupting one of the oldest industries. It's what started the Industrial Revolution, right? Using rivers to power looms to weave. And we can't do this alone. And we're very proud of our investors and partners that have been on this journey with us and who are supporting us. And I won't go through all of them, but I'll point out that we have very financially minded investors who are looking for profit. We also have brands and retailers who understand this acute pain point. And we have supply chain partners throughout the world who understand that innovation really happens there. That's where the rubber meets the road. But now with this pivot to Asia for our first large-scale facility, we're looking for local investors who understand the landscape, who can help us navigate regulation, partnerships, everything that has to happen to build such an important first step at saving this industry. So please join us. Here are my contact details. Love to hear from you. I can't wait to get your questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter. What an amazing presentation and overview. So now, a little bit of work for the audience, actually. We will invite you in the audience, as Amanda has said, to put on your funder's cap. Think of CIRC as an impact investment that you are evaluating yourself. We will invite you to submit your questions to the app, but actually rather than answering them, our panelists will comment on the questions and compare them with what they would ask if they were to be funders. I think through this exercise, we really hope that we can learn to ask better questions, work better with entrepreneurs, and build that stronger collaboration. I think for those who actually want to get the answers out of CIRC, I think Peter will be around afterwards, so please do approach him at the end. But today, I'd love to invite everyone on this learning experience with us. So, logistically, this is how it'll work. Put on your funder's cap, and in 2 minutes, please brainstorm questions at your table, discuss with your table, love for everyone to get to know each other as well, that you want to pose to CIRC. At the end of 2 minutes, we will invite one representative from your table to submit 1 or 2 questions from the table to the app. So we have 13 tables here. I'm expecting around between 13 to 20 questions in total. And afterwards, we will we'll ask everyone to vote on those questions, and our panelists will be invited up. They'll comment on the top 5 or so questions, and we'll take it from there. So if we could have everyone speak at your table, 2 minutes, and think of some questions that you might want to pose to CIRC if you were evaluating them as an investment. Please, go ahead. Okay, hope you're having good chats at your table. Just a minute or so left to come up with 1 or 2 questions that you might want to ask if you were looking at CIRC as a potential impact investment. wonderful. I think some questions already starting to come in. All right, some great conversations happening, but I'm wanting to keep to time, so if I could invite one nominee from each table, submit some of your questions into the link, click on the Innovation Showcase, and we'll see what we come up with as a room. Okay, so you'll see the questions come up. For those of you who are in the app, I think for everyone now, if you submitted your questions, could I invite everyone to click into the app and vote for your top 5? So take a look at all the questions that are coming in. Would love for everyone to be involved, to vote on your top few. And these are the ones that our panelists will be speaking about. So I'll just give another minute or so for everyone. Last chance to input your questions and for everyone to vote. The QR code yourself, and you can just read them as well. If you wanted to see the top 5, or just have your own. All right, wonderful. Do keep the votes coming in. All right, I think we are getting to a very good stage. I want to thank everyone for... It's okay. Add in one more. Give you another 30 seconds. Everyone, please put in your votes. All right, I think while everyone is putting in and voting, if I could stop the music and let me, in this time, invite the speakers back up to the panel. So would love to welcome both Hannah and Peter back to the panel. And joining them, I am delighted to also welcome Elaine Teo, the managing partner of Apricot Capital, a single family office for this panel. Elaine oversees Apricot's fund deployment, manages the investment portfolio, and they are a major investor into sustainable finance as well. So, wonderful panel here. We have the Earthshot Prize, we have a funder, as well as the entrepreneur, just to share light as to the types of questions and the ways to build the relationships with the funders. So, we see the top 5, which I think are coming up very well. If I just read out the top 5 as they are now. How do you avoid the unintended consequences of making clothing production more sustainable when excessive demand will still be a huge issue? That's one. Question 2, I really like, why wouldn't we invest in you? Good job, table 10. Third, because it is a sustainability portfolio, what is the carbon footprint of your whole operation? Fourth, how do you find the balance between protecting IP and open sourcing your tech? And then how will you manage the import of new materials, especially with the ban of export of waste? So a great group of questions, actually, both on the finance side and the business side. And maybe if I could invite the speakers for first question, out of all the questions that you see, what are the most insightful, and also what may you find least helpful when you go through and evaluate companies on your own? Maybe actually if I could start with Hannah, and sharing your view, as you've been a judge and going through the Earthshot Prize, seeing so many judging of the different finalists and the evaluation. Love to get your view on the questions. I do have to ask, I'm super curious, what does Prince William think about the entrepreneurs, and how would he approach them? So maybe Hannah, if you could kick us off.
Thank you very much. Well, we have a very rigorous and drawn-out selection process. And we look for we look for multiples of things. So to get to the top 15, you got to be pretty good. We're first and foremost looking for impact. So perhaps unlike a pure financial investor, our whole focus is what's the total addressable impact of this solution if it were to go to scale. And we think about the transformational potential that every solution has. We do a lot of vetting on whether the solution truly has been proven. We do a lot of the vetting around things like IP. And then I'd say we really look at leadership. Because at the end of the day, to go from an idea to scale takes a huge amount of personal leadership by the founders, and sometimes requires them to say, I'm not the right person to take this to the next stage. I need to step back and become the chair or something else. And the humility and the self-awareness to do that can be very challenging for people. So what we're looking for is a leadership team that brings both the innovation, the grit, and the determination, but also the thoughtfulness, the maturity, the humility to say, I want this thing to go on its journey, and I'm going to be part of this maybe, but maybe I won't. And I'm going to bring around me a team that's really strong and can operationally execute to that. So those are the kind of things that we look for. Obviously, we're a global prize, so we look for diversity and representation. We make sure that our cohort can represent amazing ideas from around the world. And that they will spark the world's imagination. And that's something we love to look for. Like, does this make you turn and go, oh, wow, I should have thought of that. Or, wow, I had no idea that could happen. And we don't necessarily look for things that are high-tech. We will also look for things that are community-based and movement-based. So it's really about diversity of ideas. Innovation can come from anywhere.
Fantastic, thank you. And so when you find them, these types of questions are what you'd ask, and that's what the group of different judges, of stakeholders within the Earthshot Prize, are these how you sieve them out?
Yeah, I think, some of these questions here, you can kind of bucket them in different pieces. Some of them are about, give me the information that I haven't yet heard. So what's the carbon footprint of your operation? Sure, let's get the information out of Peter. But actually, the real question is, maybe in the first generation, you're going to have a carbon footprint, but what's the fifth generation of what you're going to do? What's the potential you have for that? So I think a lot of the questions might be about what's true today. The really interesting question is, what's true in 5 years potentially? And do you have a sort of roadmap that you can pretty much point to that will get you there? And then the question that's not here, in my view, is how are you wired, Peter, that you're going to go on this crazy roller coaster of a journey, and what do you need? No one here has said, what do you need? What's your biggest challenge that keeps you awake at night? I always ask people that because the honesty with which they give me that answer tells me a lot about their leadership.
Thank you. If I can shift to Elaine as an impact investor, maybe I'd love if you'd be able to share your approach to due diligence and how you think about the questions you're going to ask the potential the potential grantees and fundees.
At Apricot Capital, we do a lot of direct investments. So when we do direct investments, there are check boxes that we need to tick. One of it would be geographic. You need to be in a space that we understand geographically so that we can put in our network of people to help you to scale the business. You must be something that we would term as be able to do good and do well at the same time. We believe that you can marry both do well and doing good at the same time, because the thing is, we are in the business of trying to scale and trying to reach profitability. So if, let's say, you have a great idea, but we don't see the possibility of you being to scale up, that to us will be quite a red flag. Also, at the same time, you must get the founders excited that whatever you're trying to create today will be a solution that you're trying to fill a problem gap in the market. And most importantly is people due diligence. So if I were to meet Peter for the first time, I would ask him, what is the intent that you're doing this for? What is the problem that you see in the market? And what is the gap you're trying to fill?
Fantastic. And Elaine, we've spoken a lot about in the earlier panels about philanthropy and sort of impact investing being more risk capital, taking the risks and capital going boldly where other capital doesn't dare to go. When you look at these type of questions, does that indicate to you within this room like a level of risk appetite that is conducive of that? Or if you were really thinking of risk capital, would you ask different set of questions, or would you look at things differently?
Yeah. So when I look at these questions, I think one thing that's missing is about scalability. How are you going to reach a scale where you can compete with all the other fabric manufacturers and say, I'm offering a solution and this is the price that I can offer, which is in parity with the rest of the fabric suppliers and vendors and all that. And what is the pivotal point for you to reach so that you can have a big paradigm shift? For example, is it getting Uniqlo to change 50% of their t-shirts into your kind of recycled fabrics, getting Nike, just to ink a deal or whatsoever? So what is the pivotal shift or change that you require to give you your big break?
Fantastic, thank you. And Peter, as our entrepreneur, I'm very curious, what do you think of these questions? And also, are there any questions that you find particularly difficult and even, give you a red flag? If someone asks you these questions, it will make you think twice about working with them. And so these are probably questions that people might want to avoid asking if they're funders.
Put me on the spot. The first question there, that's at the top, I like that because it's the challenge of this industry, right? This industry has evolved over hundreds of years. It's very optimized. You're not going to have a CEO tell his board and his shareholders, I'm cutting sales by 50% because it's good for the planet. So you need our solution to make that industry for that business to survive, right? So I see that as a great question, a layup, if you play basketball, to tee up why our solution will be so profitable and will be so important and help that investor achieve their returns. To Hannah's point earlier, some of these are bucketed of just get more information. Happy to do that. We always have data rooms and usually longer than a few minutes to pitch. What I'm surprised about here is that there's no question about the team. And to your point, my motivation, or what keeps me up at night, or maybe that's why wouldn't we invest you, is kind of a form of what keeps you up at night. I think those are extremely important questions. I love getting those questions because when you're across the table from an investor, I think a lot of people have the perception of the TV show Shark Tank. I don't know if they have that out here, but and it's not really like that. When we make an investment with an investor, that's a partnership. That's a marriage, to use that analogy earlier. It's a long-term thing. And so there's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times. We have to be honest with each other, open, trust, help each other. And so I really love questions and the vibrations or the chemistry of a meeting where I feel like, okay, this investor understands what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, who I'm surrounding myself with, and wants to be part of that journey and will help me and support me. And ultimately, I understand their objectives too, that they have their stakeholders, and I'm going to help them achieve those returns they need.
Yeah. I mean, I'd really like to go a bit deeper on that, because funding is really stage one, right? Then afterward comes the marriage, afterwards comes making that impact together. So maybe Peter, as an entrepreneur, what do the funders look like that you most want to build a long-term relationship with, and the most productive funders? Like, you had a great list of funders there. I think many of us would love to have support from those types of funders and organizations, but which are the ones that you feel have done the most to build, or what have they done to be able to build that strong long-term relationship with you?
I would say to roll up their sleeves, to really get into our shoes and understand what we're doing. We love investors that also have experience in scaling processes like ours, breaking into markets, understand our market dynamics. So it's why we have industry on our cap table investing in our company, because they can really help us through that. And they can politely or impolitely, I'm that happy with direct feedback, say, you're losing your mind, this is not going to work, and here's why. I love that. It saves time. We're trying to scale this solution as fast as possible because we need to for our planet. We're a B Corp, we're very mission driven. And so any investor that can help me move the ball downfield faster, that's what I'm looking for.
Wonderful. And Elaine, as an investor, would you agree with that? And are there any other tips that you've made in terms of building great relationships on the other side of the table with entrepreneurs?
I think I absolutely agree. The last thing, we were just chatting at the side that you don't want a board to come fight with you. You want someone who can really work on a partnership to help you to scale the business, someone who can give you really, plug into their network, to help you to scale. So for us in Apricot Capital, we really believe in building relationships, and how we do that is really just very simple. It's just mutual respect and open communication, because the thing is, without any form of communication, misunderstanding can happen, and after that, it will snowball to mistrust, and everyone stop talking to each other. So you don't want to snowball into that kind of a scenario. So for us, we really work alongside with our founders to give them our own point of view in terms of strategy, in terms of scaling, just be the sounding board sometimes, and you need to be able to give them mutual respect. I'll quote an example. I sit on the board of Cloversoft, which is a leading eco-friendly brand in Singapore. When I first sat on the board, I decided that we should do a project together. And the founders were really excited. 6 months into it, when we're about to close it, they came to me, Elaine, I am not comfortable with it. So there were two options. I either wrestle my way through, or I can just say, okay, let's just sit down and just talk. I chose, of course, to talk. So in the end, we took some of the good practices from the service provider, took some of their old ideas, and just put it together. We need to be able to give space to the founders to grow, and sometimes to even fall. Yeah.
Fantastic. Hannah, would love to get your thoughts, because the Earthshot Prize, on one hand, is a funder. You have the prize money, but on the other hand, it's very different. It's got access to so many more networks and supporting structures for the finalists and the entrepreneurs. Would love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, well, we see our job as really being a convener and an enabler of all of the finalists, and actually, basically we want to help enable the entire innovation ecosystem in whatever way we can. And some of that, I was thinking about the question you asked, and I sit on a board, and I watch it from another side as well in my private life. I think shared vision and shared values are really important. I think every conversation should start with, do we share the same vision of what you're trying to achieve? And do we have similar values so that when the going gets tough, we're in it together? And I think that is what will get you the return on the investment, whether it's philanthropic, impact investing, or pure VC. Because I think at that stage, you go, right, I'm all in. And what I love is when you have constructive allies that can come to you and say, with radical candor, I love what we're doing together. We've got the shared vision. Let me tell you why I think, Peter, you've lost your mind. Now let me help you figure out how we get you there. And that is what you most need from your investors and your philanthropic donors, is actually the safety to know they're on your side, including when you stumble. They're going to pick you up and help you. And they're going to stumble sometimes, and you're going to pick them up and help them too, that we've got each other's back. And then you can achieve amazing things.
Absolutely. So that safety and that truth-telling. Mindful of time, and so my final question to wrap up. If I could invite both Hannah and Elaine, what would be the top tip you have to find that jewel in the haystack of finding a great company to back? And for Peter, for the entrepreneurs in the room, your one top piece of advice in terms of approaching potential funders. So maybe if I could start with Hannah and then Elaine.
Well, I think be really clear about what your thesis is, about what you're going out and the systems change that you want to impact. If you're in love with oceans, check out our roadmap on oceans at our website, where we talk about what are some of the areas on oceans that we think need to tip and change over the next 5 years. Same with nature. Once you've identified your thesis, I would say build a portfolio. Don't just bet on one. Go out and deliberately build a portfolio of investments, because it's a numbers game. Some will not make it to the next stage and others will. But also, if you bring that portfolio together, they can create a peer network and they can support each other. And we see that with the cohort of the Earthshot Prize finalists. They all look after each other. It's incredible the way they support each other. So I think if I put my investor hat on, know what you're trying to achieve as system change, go out and invest in portfolios, including some that you think are a bit crazy. There's safe bets and there's crazy bets, but usually they actually could feed each other.
I have to say, as a wealth management institute teaching portfolio construction, I couldn't agree with that more. If I could ask Elaine, top tip.
Yeah. I think, whenever you identify a good idea, it's when there is a problem and a solution that comes in is able to fix that problem. So I've seen investment decks where the entrepreneur creates its own problem and trying to put a solution around that problem, which never existed. So such things will never be able to scale. So at the same time, when you look at the solution, you need to put yourself as a consumer, will I adopt it? Will the people around adopt it? You need to understand the consumer mindset, not only at where you live, but also geographically. For example, the hierarchy of needs that someone who's living in Cambodia and Vietnam would be vastly different from someone who lives in a city like Hong Kong and Singapore. So you need to be able to understand the consumer's mindset and whether that solution around is able to fill that gap and that problem that is surfacing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Peter, last word. Top tips on finding the ideal funder.
It goes back to something Hannah said about making sure that we're like-minded and share a vision. And I particularly love it when I meet investors and they start talking about how they can help me. And I know that sounds a little bit selfish, but I need to be a little bit selfish because we have that mission and we want to scale it. And knowing that I have an investor who's going to help and is understanding and I can be completely open and honest with is so critical. And I think they expect the same of me. And building that foundation of trust from the very beginning is super important.
Wonderful, wonderful last words to leave us with. And with that, could I invite everyone to give a warm round of applause to our panelists. Everyone, thank you so much. We have now come to the end of our session. Warm round of applause for all of you for staying on day 3 of the Philanthropy Asia Summit. Thank you so much for staying with us. We do have networking and drinks and snacks outside at the Bay Area. My colleagues will be there to usher you. But before that, if I could ask everyone, back to the QR code. We at the Wealth Management Institute, we love feedback. Love to hear your thoughts on this session. If you go down to the bottom, you'll see a survey for feedback. There's also one for PAS as well, but would love to hear what you all thought. Hope everyone had as good a time as we did up here and look forward to seeing everyone at the drinks. Thank you so much.